Okay, here's a wild thought for you. What if being a good person, in the way we usually think about it, is actually holding you back? Today, we are diving deep into one of philosophy's most provocative ideas, Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of nobility. And I'll give you a hint. It has absolutely nothing to do with being nice.
So let's just start right there. What if everything we've been taught about goodness, about morality, is actually a kind of cage, something that's preventing real human greatness from emerging? This is the deep and frankly uncomfortable territory Nietzsche wants to explore.
Yeah, Nietzsche wasn't interested in politeness or what we call self-sacrifice. His whole idea of nobility is a full-on challenge to our everyday moral assumptions. He's basically forcing us to take a hard look at what we think is truly valuable in a person's character.
He called this special quality an ancient pride. It's a really powerful and, let's be honest, pretty difficult idea. So let's break down exactly what he was getting at.
To even begin to understand this, we have to step outside our usual boxes of good and evil. Nietzsche's whole argument is that our moral framework, the one we live by, is built on a total misunderstanding of what makes someone truly exceptional. So let me ask you, if you had to define a noble person right now, what would you say? Seriously, just think about it for a second. What are the first qualities that pop into your head? I bet for most of us, we'd land on things like this, right? Moral purity, maybe being rich or having a high social status, and almost definitely unselfishness, always putting others first. These are the standard answers society feeds us. And Nietzsche's response to all of that? A hard no. For him, real nobility has absolutely nothing to do with any of these things. In fact, he sees them as the complete opposite of what he's talking about. And this brings us right to the core of his idea, this fundamental split he saw in humanity. He believed there were two basic types of people, two types of souls, the noble and the common. This chart lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have the common soul. It's all about utility. It's constantly asking, what's the point? Is this useful? Will it help me get ahead? It's calculating, or as Nietzsche puts it, shrewd and laborious. But then you have the noble soul. It's driven by this powerful internal necessity, like a fire inside. It doesn't act for some practical gain, it acts because it must. And this often leads it to do things that everyone else just sees as, well, folly. And this quote just nails it. From a practical, business-minded viewpoint, the noble soul's actions make no sense. You can't put them on a spreadsheet. There's no clear why that satisfies the logic of the marketplace. It's objectless. Now, contrast that with the common person, who's basically running a cost-benefit analysis in their head all day long. Every action gets weighed by its utilitarian return. It's a life defined by calculation and the need for self-preservation, not by some grand inner passion. So what happens when these two types of people bump up against each other in the real world? Well, it leads to a huge misunderstanding, where the noble person's best qualities are seen as something dangerous. Nietzsche calls this a wicked independence. The collective, what Nietzsche famously calls the herd, doesn't look at the noble individual with any kind of admiration. No, it looks at them with distrust, maybe even disgust. And why? Because the herd just can't wrap its head around a life that isn't driven by the practical need for safety and personal gain. And you can see here just how it breaks down. That fierce independence of the noble soul, the herd just reinterprets it as wicked selfishness. Their huge, overflowing passion, that's just a dangerous disruption to the social order. And that powerful inner drive, it's written off as incomprehensible folly. The greatest virtues get twisted into vices. And this is the critical point. The noble person doesn't follow some rule book that's handed to them. They don't look outside themselves for a moral code. No, they are lawgivers. They create their own values, their own purpose, their own entire reason for being. Okay, so this next part, this is probably Nietzsche's most controversial claim of all. Where does this nobility even come from? Is it something you can learn? According to Nietzsche, this kind of nobility is an activism. Think of it like a biological throwback, an inheritance of a much older, more primal kind of strength that's become super rare. For him, it's a preordained state. It's fundamental to who you are. It's not a skill you can just learn in a class or something you achieve through hard work. And what that means is that any attempt by a common person to become noble is just doomed from the start. They can watch the noble person, they can copy their rituals, they can apply all their hard work, but what do they get in the end? only a shriveled consistency, a cheap, hollow imitation. Nietzsche just called this whole effort vanity. And there you have it, put as bluntly as possible. This kind of nobility can't be bought, and it can't be taught in any real way outside the lecture room. In Nietzsche's view, there is a permanent, uncrossable gap between the noble and the common.
So, where does all this leave us, especially in our modern world? Well, in this final section, we're going to see how Nietzsche raises the stakes even higher.
Nietzsche famously declared the death of God, which really meant the collapse of a single, divine moral order for everyone. And in this new world, with no cosmic referee watching over us, the noble person's job becomes even bigger, even more dangerous, and maybe even more tragic.
And this is the ultimate powerful image of Nietzsche's noble soul. In a universe that has no built-in meaning or purpose, an objectless universe, the noble person doesn't fall into despair. Instead, they become the source of their own light. They become their own sun, creating value and meaning out of the sheer chaos.
And that leaves us with a final massive question for ourselves. What would it actually mean to live like that? To truly reject that constant calculation of what's in it for me, and to instead become the one and only lawgiver for your own existence. That is the profound and deeply personal challenge that Nietzsche leaves us to wrestle with.